All right, what is up and welcome to episode number 16 and a week 9 recap here of college football with Kope and Regg. And this week was, I would say, a little bit more low-key compared to the last couple, but there was still a lot of exciting action and there were some upsets. And we're actually going to start off with a big upset here. Kansas at home beat Oklahoma 38-33, and Kansas looked really impressive in this one. Their offense looked really good. They put up a lot of points. They had the pick six early on Dylan Gabriel, and I mean, I know Reg has more details about this one, but just from the outside looking in, I would say it's just big-time stuff for the Kansas program, and that's a tough loss for Oklahoma at this point in the year.
I'm just going to get to some stats right away. Both these teams had pretty much identical stats on paper. 269 rushing yards for Oklahoma, 225 for Kansas. Oklahoma had 4.9, almost 5 yards per carry. Kansas 5.5 yards per carry, so pretty close there. Kansas actually outrushed them. Kansas rushed the ball, or actually Oklahoma rushed the ball 14 more times, 55-41. The total offense, 440 yards for Oklahoma, 443 yards for Kansas. Very close there.
Yeah.
I was watching this game, and it really wasn't the cleanest game. There was a lot of mistakes being made, a lot of missed tackles, a lot of undisciplined play on the field, really, from both sides. But Kansas established a run game, and they made the necessary plays to win this game. They picked off Dylan Gabriel one time, and also they had a fumble on the kickoff return, Oklahoma did, in the start of the fourth quarter, which pretty much lost them the game.
That's big. Yeah, that is huge.
So pretty much this is a huge bump in Oklahoma's season that I don't think anyone expected to happen. And this is a huge jolt for Kansas as a program. They had a backup quarterback in this game the whole time, which Jalen Daniels, I don't think he's been playing for a while. I don't know. Not exactly sure what happened to him.
Last year he had injury problems too.
But what's left for Oklahoma? They go to Oklahoma State for the in-state rivalry next week. Then they have West Virginia at home. Then they go to BYU and then TCU at home. So it's not crazy the rest of the way for them, but I still think this could end up being a huge loss for them.
Well, and that also, there's multiple teams now with one loss in the Big 12, so they're not a guarantee anymore to make the Big 12 championship.
No.
Everyone was talking about the rematch between them and Texas, but what if one of them's playing Kansas State now or something? So, I mean, yeah, that's just tough. That's not where you want to be. And now Kansas is even in a spot where they could be in a Big 12 championship.
Kansas, to me, looks to maybe finish 10-2 or 9-3 at least, because they got Iowa State after this. I would take Kansas there. Then they have Texas Tech. I like Kansas there. Kansas State could get them definitely.
They've been rivalry game, very well. Though, you never know.
Oh yeah,
I mean that'll probably be a big one.
That'll be a fun game to watch, definitely, especially with Avery Johnson and Kansas State.
Yeah.
They're a freshman quarterback that can run. And then they finish it off with at Cincinnati, which that should be a win, I think.
Yeah, Cincinnati's just been struggling this year, and the only thing with that is coming off the Kansas State week, but. Yeah, 9-3 or 10-2 looks very likely, and that's crazy for Kansas.
That's
based
good.
off where their program was just a couple of years ago.
Definitely,
that's crazy. Their coach has them in a great spot. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name exactly. I think it's Lance Leipold, Leipold maybe, but he's got them in a great spot, and he's doing great things there. And we'll see if they can keep that rolling.
That's really all I got for this game, and. Honestly, Kansas kind of just outplayed Oklahoma on Saturday.
They were just better. That day. The next game we got here is Penn State and Indiana, a little Big Ten action. Penn State beats Indiana 33-24, so it wasn't their greatest game by any means, but they came out on top. They got the win. They're 7-1. They are getting crazy amounts of hate this week, like on social media and stuff. Just I don't know. Aller's getting a lot of hate, and they're 7-1, man. People are saying things like Penn State sucks. They don't suck. They could lose the next 4 games, and they still wouldn't suck. They just obviously wouldn't be a great team. But I think they're 7-1. They're still at least a top 10, top 12 team. That's still a good team. And they're still going to put up a fight. They're still probably going to win most of the rest of the games besides maybe Michigan. So the hate is crazy to me. It's crazy. It's just unwarranted, and it comes for everyone. Like Ohio State gets hate for winning by 14 this week. Notre Dame gets hate for beating. Everybody gets hate for such unnecessary reasons. It's crazy.
I think I brought it up a few hours ago. I brought up the example of when Alabama lost to Texas, and then Alabama goes and plays probably the worst game you've ever seen under Nick Saban against USF, South Florida. And everyone's writing off Alabama. Alabama's going to lose 4 or 5 games.
They're
like,
done.
that's just...
Their program's torched.
Sometimes a team just sometimes a team just has a terrible day. These are college kids.
Yes, they're 20 years old. The other team is trying to win too.
The whole other school's coaching staff and all the players on the other team, like, football is their life too. Like, it's not...
They're not going out and thinking, oh, we play Penn State this week, I guess we should just lose. Or Wisconsin saying, yeah, we're just gonna lose.
Yeah.
Like, it's dumb. It's so dumb. But I mean, besides all that, me and Reg get a little angry about that stuff sometimes. But besides all that, Penn State, not a great week, but they're sitting at 7-1. We'll see what they can keep doing the rest of the way. They've definitely still got the big one with Michigan. The next game, another Big Ten game, Northwestern beats Maryland 33-27, and this one was a big surprise to me. Northwestern did not look good at all to start the year. They had all the hazing stuff going on and whatnot. They're sitting at 4-4 now. They might make a bowl game. So Northwestern has turned it around big time, in my opinion, and Maryland, pretty much since the Ohio State losses, kind of the wheels have fallen off the train there. They've lost 3 in a row now. They were 5-0, and it's just tough right now for them. You come off a loss like Ohio State, and you were riding so high, but you got to find a way to bounce back if you want to be an actual top quality program.
I feel like Northwestern has almost done better since that allegation
came
out.
Literally, that was pretty much the turning point. They started bad, but once they kind of, I think because they got the interim coach now and all that, it's a good thing to see from them after such a negative thing that happened. I think it's a positive to see how many games they've won this season so far. We've got an ACC game now here with NC State and Clemson. And speaking of 4-4 teams, yeah, think about that. Clemson and Northwestern have the same record right now. NC State beats Clemson this week 24-17. NC State improves to 5-3 on the year, and Dabo's Tigers are 4-4 now. They're in trouble.
I know a lot of people want to blame Dabo for not using the transfer portal and this and that. But still, Clemson's roster is super talented.
Yes.
There's no reason. This isn't about the transfer portal. There's something internal going on that is not clicking, something that stopped clicking that has been clicking for the past 5 years that kind of just, I don't know what's happening with Clemson
just
right now.
Big time. It's the stuff that Jimbo and A&M have gotten made fun of for the last 3 years. Just big time underperforming with the roster you have.
Yeah, 100%.
So, do you think if you would use the transfer portal, that would be the difference? Or you think right now Dabo might not be the move, or his staff might just not be the move?
Not after you lose 4 games the way they've lost them. And they got another one. They got another loss coming up this week.
That's a bold statement coming from an unbiased Notre Dame fan. Yeah, I honestly, they'll probably be sitting at 4-5 in a week, and that's real bad.
That is unfathomable.
Yeah, that's not.
So many people had Clemson in their playoff preseason.
I had them top 10 preseason. I thought, looking at their roster, they were going to be good, and
you thought they'd bring in the right piece at the offensive coordinator position.
Yes, and with Garrett Riley at O-coordinator, I thought that would be a turning point as well, but.
Just
apparently
an
not.
Absolute disaster in Clemson.
Bad things in off-brand Death Valley. Next game, then, we go to the SEC here. We got a little rivalry action with Georgia and Florida, and Georgia laid the wood on Florida 43-20. Just domination. Georgia looked like Georgia without Brock Bowers as well, putting up 43 points. A lot of people, I think even me and Reg, thought he was just like the carrier of that offense. If they didn't have him, it wasn't going to function the same way, run the same way, but they turned it around big time. Their defense played pretty solid. Georgia with 20 points on the board. Florida with 20 points on the board. Big win for Georgia, I think. It's just another win to establish that right now they're the number 1 team, in my opinion. They've kept themselves there. If you look at their schedule, it really hasn't been strong enough to, I said, solidify them at 1. But if you just base it off the past 2 years and they just keep winning games, they're still the number 1 team.
Carson Beck had a nice game.
Did he?
19 for 28, 68%, 315 yards, 2 touchdowns. So I know a lot of Georgia fans have been waiting to see Carson Beck be the next great quarterback there. I don't expect that, but I think he's definitely an upgrade from Stetson Bennett.
I was gonna say, I think he can do more than Stetson did, and
more arm talent. Definitely more arm talent.
Yeah, but Stetson also, he was so underrated how much he actually did.
This is also
just because of the way he played and who he was.
He was also 36.
I mean, that also makes a difference when it's your 17th season of college football.
I'd like to see a veteran Carson Beck at quarterback and see what happens.
Did you hear Chris Fowler call Bo Nix 40 years old during the Oregon-Utah game? Or no, he was announcing a different game, but they were talking about Oregon-Utah. And this dude says, Oregon makes it look easy. Oregon and Bo Nix make it look easy against Utah today, but Bo Nix is 40 years old. He just, on a national TV game, he just roasts the dude.
Do you understand that Bo Nix played his first college football game in 2018?
Yeah, I remember it against Auburn when he was playing. Or no, he was for Auburn against Oregon. That's what I meant.
But think about what we were doing in 2018.
I was probably a freshman or sophomore in high school about.
Exactly.
That was pretty crazy. That was a very funny moment from the game Chris Fowler was doing this weekend. And, I mean, it is funny with transfer portal and everything now. There's a lot more older quarterbacks. And everybody's got, or I don't know how much longer that extends on, but a lot of guys now have 6 years of eligibility to work with. And,
I'm pretty sure it's just you had to be a player on the team during COVID.
Yeah, I think you get another year. Yeah, that makes sense. So, that was pretty funny stuff. And speaking of that, the next game we're going to move on to here is Oregon absolutely waxes Utah this week, 35-6. I picked Utah before this game. I expected their defense to actually be able to contain Oregon a little bit, and I thought they'd put enough points on the board, but clearly I was wrong on both sides of the ball, and I think Reg picked Oregon, and he was looking at the stats and said it just looked like Oregon had the advantages. So that was a good pick by him, but I'll go over to him here. He's got more detail about this one. If I just look at it at face value like earlier, I mean, this is big for Oregon. They're in a great spot right now.
Definitely.
They just have to stay on the path they're on and end up winning the Pac-12.
Oregon pretty much completely dominated this game. 142 yards rushing to Utah's 99 with less attempts, 9 less attempts, that is. And then passing, they doubled them, 248 yards to 142 yards. So Utah only had 241 total yards to Oregon's 390. But that's not the stat that really stands out to me. The one that is Oregon established their run game with 5.3 yards per carry and held Utah to just 2.8 yards per carry. If you can hold a team under 3 yards per carry, you're probably going to win.
That's big time stuff, especially the way Utah relies on the run and the quarterback run and the way they need that to help their defense as well. And I think that shows how good Oregon's defense is. Oregon does have a good, and you've been high on them all year. Oregon's defense is very good.
Also, 248 yards through the air for Oregon, but that's a very efficient 248 yards. 24 for 31, Bo Nix was. And he also had 2 touchdowns and did not throw an interception in this game. Utah never wins this game with 2 turnovers and 2 more turnovers than Oregon in any way. And that's what they did in this game. Utah's quarterback threw 2 picks in this game, and it was just not a very good showing from Utah, especially at home. You thought maybe the crowd would have a little bit of a factor in this, getting Utah some momentum, but Oregon kind of just steamrolled through them.
Yeah, rough day for Utah, rough day for the program, but they're still at a fine, not a great spot now, but they're still at a fine spot. They're 6-2. I mean, it's all about bouncing back, man. That's what it's always about.
Utah, what they have left, they have Arizona State at home, so who knows what could happen there. They go to Washington after that, so that's going to be a huge matchup. And then they go to Arizona, which who knows what could happen there. And then they have Colorado at home. Who knows what could happen there.
I was going to say, Pac-12, you can kind of pick about any game and say what's going to happen.
The Pac-12 is just insane.
It's awesome, man. Awesome.
I love it.
I know I still got a couple Pac-12 games to bring up because there was more mayhem there this week.
Oregon, though, they have 1 loss to this point, only to Washington by 3 points. And that a lot of people would consider that. a coaching loss.
Yeah, there's so many people put a lot of question marks on that one still.
But the rest of their schedule, they have California at home, so hopefully a protest doesn't happen at that game.
That was fun.
And then they have USC at home, so who knows what could happen there. Then they go to Arizona State, and then they're at home against Oregon State. And Oregon State, another team that anything can happen in the Pac-12.
It looks to me like Oregon, if they do what they're supposed to and they keep playing the right way, they should be on their way to the Pac-12 championship. And then at that point, they're fighting for a playoff spot, I think.
And you always love when the Civil War at the end of the year is actually a huge matchup.
Yes, exactly. Well, with how Oregon State just was at a low point there for
definitely, for a few years.
It's definitely big time for them to have that turned around, and that's a rivalry that we like to see being at a good point in college football. Moving on over to the ACC again here, we got Duke and Louisville. Duke came into the week at 5-2, and Louisville was 6-1, and Louisville dominates 23-0, which was pretty surprising to me, honestly. I mean, I didn't expect Duke to put up a load of points, but I didn't expect them to get shut out, and I didn't expect them to give up 23 more than they scored. So that's a big win for Louisville, and 7-1, man, for the Cardinals. That's a big surprise this year.
Very big surprise.
I don't think anyone besides maybe some Louisville people would have said we're going 7-1 at this point. So good for them so far, and I'm going to go over to Reg here to see what he's got on this one.
So Louisville pretty much dominated this whole game, but they really dominated on defense. They held Duke to just 202 yards.
Nice. That's big time.
51 through the ground with 2.4 yards per carry, and then 151 through the air, and they picked off Riley Leonard a time. Louisville on the other end, though, they pounded the rock against Duke, 234 rushing yards, and most of those came from Jawar Jordan. He had 21 carries, 163 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's 7.8 yards per carry.
Jordan has had a really good year for Louisville. He's been effective all year, and he's been a strong part of their offense. And they've got a good quarterback in Jack Plummer, but he's thrown picks at times and been inconsistent at times. And it's always good to have a running back you can go to in a run game. You can go to behind a good O-line to keep things established and keep something consistent established.
Yeah, there's not much to say for this game besides what's already said. Louisville pretty much just ran the ball, played defense, and dominated this game. And if you haven't heard me from the past episodes, that's the style of play. I think if you're going to win a game and you're going to dominate, that's the best way to do it, is run the ball and play defense, and they showed exactly why that's true. Yeah,
that's one thing I know me and Reg definitely agree on. It'll always be, to me, the biggest factor in a football game.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, if you can establish a ground game, you just control everything. That way, you got the clock on your side, you can control the line of scrimmage.
Just more in general, controlling the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, controlling the line of scrimmage also gives you a mental advantage. Like, it definitely is a big part, and Louisville showed this week why.
Duke just picked up their 3rd loss, so I don't know what it looks like in the ACC for them at this point, but the rest of their schedule looks like they got Wake Forest at home, then they go to North Carolina, so that's going to be a fun one. Then they go to Virginia, which Virginia's been playing out of their minds the past few weeks. And then they have Pitt at home, so they should pick up a win there. Louisville, on the other hand, Louisville is sitting at 7-1. And to me, Louisville looks to win out with Miami being their biggest threat. And they got Virginia Tech at home, then they got Virginia at home. So the 2 Virginia schools back-to-back at home. Then they go to Miami, which is going to be their hardest game, which, if you've ever watched a Miami home game, they don't fill the stadium for shit.
Home field advantage doesn't exist in the Hard Rock.
Which is very disappointing for one. I feel like that's a fan base that should be filling the crowd every single game.
Definitely. That's something that could be a lot more fun for college football.
And then they finished the year with the Kentucky in-state matchup at home against Kentucky. So
that's going to be a great rivalry this year.
Very doable for Louisville to finish 11-1 going into the ACC championship. And who would have thought?
Who would have thought we'd be saying that week 8?
I think the one game they're not going to be favored in is against Miami.
Or after 8 games, sorry, I said week 8.
Yeah, the one game they're not going to be favored in, I think, betting-wise, is going to be Miami.
Yeah,
if I had to guess.
Kentucky one, did you say is the Kentucky one at Kentucky?
No, it's home.
Oh, okay, yeah, see, so they'll be favored in that one too. Yeah, so we'll see what Louisville can do the rest of the way. They've been playing great football this year, and I mean, honestly, I like it. I hope to see them keep winning. The next game, then, another ACC matchup. I think Red just brought up how good Virginia's been in the last couple weeks, and they almost took it to Miami after beating North Carolina last week. Miami escapes 29-26. Miami's 6-2 now, so they're playing pretty well this year. They're at a decent spot. Virginia falls to 2-6. They've struggled at times, but they've had the big win over North Carolina, so they're playing good. They're playing good as of late. We'll see if Miami can keep that going. As Red just mentioned, they got a game against Louisville later this year. I mean, I really don't see them competing for the ACC title at this point, but you never know, man. With only 2 losses, they're right there. They could do it. Then we go to the Pac-12, and we got USC, another team that's getting absolutely blasted right now for that defense. They survived Cal on the road, 50-49.
It looks like the halftime score to a basketball game.
Literally, just loads of points all over the board. That USC Swiss cheese D, as CBS calls them. You cannot give up that many points consistently and expect to be a top program that's going to compete for at least a playoff spot. Lincoln Riley, I think, thinks of himself as having a team that's a playoff contender, a top 10 type team, and you can't be without a defense. And that's how he was at Oklahoma too. He was always just held back just barely by the defense, and it's one of those things he's got to figure that out if he wants to take the next step. But I mean, USC, they're 7-2 still. They're still putting up a lot of points. They score 50 again. Caleb Williams didn't play his greatest game, but he had 379 yards and multiple touchdowns, so it's not like you can give him too much hate. They win the game again. They win the game on the backs of their offense. And really, I mean, you never know. USC beats a couple good teams, and if they can outscore some teams, they could make something happen still, but it's not looking too likely at this point.
The past 4 weeks have been rough for them.
Big time. On to the Pac-12 again with Washington at Stanford, and Washington wins 42-33, so about like the Penn State-Indiana game, a win by 9 over a subpar opponent. It's just tough, man. Washington, since the Oregon win, has looked worse, and Oregon has looked better since that game. And especially with the way the game went, there's just a lot of people in the Pac-12 leaning Oregon's way, I feel like. It's 33 points to Stanford. That's not something a playoff team wants to be doing. Now, it is 1 week, but they've had a couple other weeks where they've also been struggling. They beat Arizona State 15-7, and they need to get the foot back on the gas pedal like they had when they came flying out through about the first 4 games of this year. I thought they were clear-cut the best offense in the country, and they were making some crazy plays, putting up huge stats, and just as of late, man, it looks like they're going downhill a little bit, and the Pac-12 madness continues. Another close one in the Pac-12 from a bad team.
I think they're coming back to earth a little bit more, kind of playing a little bit more usual Washington football than they were turning into some Washington football that we've never seen before at the start of the year.
Those first couple games were crazy. Penix was my far and away Heisman for a little bit there. And
yeah, definitely.
It hasn't been consistent enough since then. Next game, we go to the SEC, and we got number 21 Tennessee. Went on the road and beat Kentucky by 6. That's a good win for Tennessee. Kentucky is struggling lately. I mean, that's 3 straight losses now, and it's ever since those comments their coach made after the Georgia game. You can't expect a team to rally or something around you after that. Nobody's going to want to come out and be like, all right, let's win for this guy now. They're just, you put them in a tough spot, and Tennessee, really, they're in a solid spot, sitting at 6-2. They could still potentially beat a few teams and make stuff happen in the SEC, but right now we'll see. Maybe they'll try to compete for a New Year's Six Bowl or something.
And I don't know, I'm not going to speak for anyone else, but if my coach went out and publicly said something like that, I don't know if I would want to really give my 100% for him for the rest of the year, honestly. It'd be hard.
He basically just said, I don't have good enough players. It's hard to come out and be like, all right, that's a guy I want to play for.
Kentucky probably has a top 30, 35 talent team in the country.
I believe they're about number 28 or something. That's not exact, but they're in the 20s, I think.
You can't be complaining about that.
It's a tough thing, man.
And he specifically himself, he's the head coach and he's been there. He built that roster.
Yeah, he's the one that recruits those guys. He's the one
that's your team.
Yeah, he's the one that probably is about the final say in who they're bringing in. And
you're going to complain about the players you have mid-season after a loss? Why don't you come out before the season and say, we're not going to win very many games because we just don't have a great roster?
It's the same thing. We just saw it twice this week with Deion Sanders did it at Colorado talking about his O-lineman.
You can't just come out and say that mid-season. And for one, you shouldn't be saying that in the public anyways. That should be, if it's even said at all, it should be between coaches and then a substitution is made out of position or something like that.
It's not a thing that you just complain to the media about.
No.
Pitt's coach did it too after the Notre Dame game. He said, I thought we had great players last year. We lost some, and I thought we replaced them, but apparently not.
I think this is probably stemming from the NIL era now.
It is.
Because coaches are seeing their players more as employees because they're getting paid.
And they're getting more upset because you can actually see which advantages other teams have now. Yeah. More on a number basis. You see how much more they're spending and stuff.
And I feel like when a coach looks at their player less as a student athlete and more as now just a football player that's earning a check, they're going to be a lot more harsh in what they say and how they treat their players.
Yeah, more treat them in an NFL type of thing.
Yeah, more of a business type relationship.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we really got anything else for Tennessee, Kentucky, but Kentucky's got to figure something out, and hopefully Tennessee can keep it rolling for them. Next game then is going back to the Big Ten. Number 3, Ohio State on the road at Wisconsin, a little night game. That's a tough place to play at night, man, Madison, Wisconsin. But
definitely.
They just don't quite have what they want established, I think, with Luke Fickell yet. I mean,
they're not there yet with Luke Fickell.
Yeah, it was like you said earlier, he's trying to do new stuff with the same roster that they built.
That's not Luke Fickell's Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly.
Not yet.
So I think give Wisconsin a couple years. They're not at a bad spot. They're 5-3. They can still compete for the West. And maybe that's a matchup you can see later in the season if Ohio State can find a way through and Wisconsin finds its way out of the West. So it's not an unlikely thing that we get a great game from them later on in the season. But this game, Marvin Harrison cooked again, another over 100-yard game. McCord just kind of seems to go to him when he doesn't know what else to do or which you can't really blame him. I feel like any quarterback would. Stroud would do it last year. It's just you got a guy like that, you got to use it.
Any quarterback ever would rely on Marvin Harrison a few times.
Exactly. TreVeyon Henderson had a big game for the Buckeyes too, which that was a big deal because he's just so inconsistent with the injuries, and I know he's got the talent to be a great player. It's just a matter of actually consistently doing it. He put up over 100 rush yards. I believe he had about 45 receiving yards, so it was good to see him worked into the rotation a little bit. Then we go back to the Pac-12. More action in the Pac-12. UCLA beats Colorado 28-16. Colorado's defense, really, they didn't play too bad. They held a UCLA, a solid offense, 28, but they just didn't do enough offensively. Again, Deion called out the O-line like he probably shouldn't have publicly, but it is the problem there. That's their biggest hole on their team, and it's just a matter of, I don't know, maybe you give it a year or two, and if they have that established, they're right there competing in the Pac-12, but as of now, they're just a step short.
I did hear in his press conference, Deion, he said, we're about 9 or 10 players away.
Yep, that's what he was saying. They're just a little bit short right now. There's just spots to fill and guys to improve over. There's still guys that are going to improve that they already have from this year to next, so we'll see what they can do. But it's not a terrible loss for them. It's a solid win for UCLA. UCLA now sits at 6-2, so they're not in a bad spot in the Pac-12 at all either.
It's just kind of unrealistic to demand excellence from each position group after you do an overhaul of a program like
exactly.
that. Culturally, everything. Like a complete shift in the Colorado football program.
It just really realistically can't be expected.
No.
Next game then, we had another upset for North Carolina. They fall for the second week in a row, this time to Georgia Tech, 46-42. A big-time shootout in the ACC, some exciting action. Georgia Tech improves to 4-4 now on the year. North Carolina falls to 6-2. That's got to be tough, man. I mean, Drake May played well, but their defense gives up 46 points to Georgia Tech, and it's the same type of deal with a Jaden Daniels type of thing at LSU. The quarterback can make great plays, and their offense can have good receivers and all that, but if you can't stop the other team, you can't win the game.
Nope.
And that was North Carolina's problem in this one. One more to talk about here, another upset, and that was in the Pac-12. Of course, Pac-12 at night provided us with some madness. This was a 10:30 game, and Arizona takes down Oregon State 27-24.
Arizona might be my favorite team this year.
They are fun, man. They've just been doing fun stuff. They put up points. Their quarterback's fun to watch. They knock off a top 15 team, which a lot of people were high on Oregon State as of the last couple weeks. And
it's got to be stressful being an Arizona fan.
Wow, no doubt.
Down to the wire every single week.
Every time. And they're sitting at 5-3. So you talk about an up and down, just
that's a good spot for Arizona as a program now.
And that's what I was seeing people talking about that earlier, how Arizona's a program. You got to watch for them being on the rise. Like, they've been beating good teams. They've been competing with good teams. And you talk about a program, they take another step or two up, and all of a sudden they're competing for a Pac-12 title. So
they did get. I know he just decommitted, so it doesn't mean as much anymore. But they did get a commitment from a 5-star edge, Elijah Rushing, earlier in the year.
And just the fact they got a guy like that looking at him.
Just a guy like he's willing to commit there, and then probably got flipped. Yeah. I would say for NIL purposes, but.
It's just one of them things. Maybe in 3 years they keep a guy like that.
Oh,
and all of a sudden they've got something established, and that's just another exciting. Which conference are they going to after this? I can't even
Arizona
tell you for sure. Yeah, probably the Big 12.
I would guess. Yeah, it's the Big 12. I think both of the Arizona teams are going to the Big 12.
Yeah, that just seems to make the most sense. Which none of the new conference stuff makes sense. Jeez, but
it'll all get hashed out.
Yeah, it says here Big 12. Yeah, we'll see. It could provide some excitement. It could be fun, but
things are still coming that are going to change. And what I mean by that is because when you're going to load all these conferences up, because they already had an automatic bid for the Pac-12 for the playoff.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Pac-12 is going to be 2 teams. So you can't give.
It's not going to,
they're going to have to restructure the way the playoff works. So we're going to see that sometime soon.
That's where I don't like the whole automatic bid thing.
I hate
especially if we have, 3 giant conferences. I don't think you can just give the teams automatic bids then, because there's going to be multiple teams in each of those conferences that could be a playoff contender, especially a 12-team playoff contender.
Why can it never just be the this many best teams?
The top 12 teams, top 16 teams.
The 4 best teams,
literally.
Or the 12. It doesn't matter. How many
just pick a number, and it's I completely
put the
agree
best
with
teams
that.
into the postseason.
We tend to do a little overcomplicating when it comes to all that.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's all we got for games of the week this week. I mean, there wasn't a huge sample size, but it was a fun week again. College football has just been crazy this year. Upsets and top teams playing inconsistently, and then some top teams some weeks look great. And then, it's just been fun, man. I'm still excited to see what we get the next couple weeks. I know there's a couple big matchups coming up this next week. We won't get into any of that just yet, though. That'll be in the next episode. So we're going to move on now to the players of the week. We just got a few to bring up here real quick to wrap this episode up. I'm going to go over to Reg here and let him go first.
So we got a repeat from last week, and it's my boy at safety for Notre Dame, Xavier Watts. I'm going to get to his stats for the past 2 weeks first. So the past 2 weeks, Xavier Watts has had 10 tackles, a tackle for loss, 4 interceptions, a forced fumble, and a touchdown.
That's wild. He's putting up big-time numbers.
And this past week against Pittsburgh, he had 3 tackles, a tackle for loss, and 2 interceptions. Back-to-back weeks with 2 interceptions. That is crazy for any player in college football. So that's going to be my defensive player of the week. And then I'm going to get to Kope for his player of the week.
I got running back then this week. I got Ollie Gordon, which I brought him up before, but for Oklahoma State, he keeps cooking. They beat Cincinnati 45-13 this week. He had 25 carries for 271 yards. That's 10.8 yards a carry and 2 touchdowns. That's a big-time game, man. He's just consistently been putting up big numbers. And like we just talked about a little bit ago, having an established running game can just put you at such an advantage. And since he's really established himself, Oklahoma State has improved big time. They started off not great this year. They had the loss to South Alabama. But since then, they've played well. And I believe they're 6-2 now maybe. So they've had themselves at a great spot since that bad start.
20-plus carries and having more than 10 yards per carry is insane.
Just demolished them.
That offensive line had to be eating against Cincinnati, And that gets to my second player of the week. I have my offensive player. A similar game from him, Frank Gore Jr. I'm sure you've heard of his dad. Played a long time in the NFL.
Quite a few years.
Southern Miss running back. He had 24 carries for 247 yards and 2 touchdowns. So another guy that had 20-plus carries and over 10 yards per carry, which is just absolutely insane. Like, I'd be happy if I did that in Madden.
Yeah, that's great stuff from him. And you remember the game last year where his aunt came up after the game?
That was hilarious. If you haven't seen that clip...
Auntie Chill, is that what it was?
Yeah.
That's what it was.
If you haven't seen that clip, look up, I guess I would look up Frank Gore Auntie video.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
That's a funny video.
It's always good to know you got people around you.
Yeah, definitely. Seems like a very tight-knit family.
Yeah, he seems like a good dude.
Yeah, definitely.
The last player we're going to talk about here is Joshua Cephas, the receiver for UTSA. They beat East Carolina this week 41-27. And I don't even, we've talked about some big numbers this year receiving-wise.
This is ridiculous.
30, 35 yards per catch. 4 receptions, 183 yards. That is 45.8 yards a catch, and he put up a touchdown. 46 basically yards a catch.
I'm confused how he only has 1 touchdown.
Yeah, I don't understand. How are you catching that long of balls and not scoring? They
just threw 4 streaks to this dude.
Apparently. And
4 deep balls.
Big time stuff. Just big time. That's crazy. 46 yards a catch. So there's always, it just seems like this year in college football, each week there's a stat like that you can find where some guy's just putting up crazy numbers. And, we'll see it again next week probably. And
that's ridiculous. Just think about field position.
You can't do that on Retro Bowl, man.
Think about field position.
Yeah.
There's a lot of drives where maybe the offense doesn't even get 46 yards to gain.
Yep.
And this dude, oh my God.
He's doing it per catch.
Insane week for Joshua Cephas.
Yeah, huge stuff for him. So a good win for UTSA, and I believe that is all we got for this episode. That was another good episode of College Football with Kope and Regg. We appreciate everyone for joining us again.